Rain pounded against the windshield of the sleek Aston Martin as Ethan Drake sped along the coastal highway. The 35-year-old tech mogul gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white as he pressed harder on the accelerator. The call he'd just received from his board of directors had sent him into a rage. Someone was trying to orchestrate a hostile takeover of Drake Industries, the company he'd built from nothing. "Incompetent fools," he muttered, jabbing at his phone to call his lawyer. Lightning cracked across the sky, briefly illuminating the sharp angles of his face, jawline that could cut glass, piercing blue eyes, and a permanent furrow between his brows that not even his $10,000 anti-aging treatments could erase. The car's navigation system announced an upcoming sharp turn, but Ethan was too distracted to slow down in time. His tires squealed against the wet asphalt as he tried to correct course. The world spun in a blur of headlights and rain before everything went black. Olivia Chen was driving home from her late shift at the local veterinary clinic when she spotted the wrecked luxury car half off the cliff edge, its headlights still on but pointing toward the churning ocean below. Without hesitation, she pulled over and ran toward the vehicle, rain soaking through her scrubs. "Hello? Can you hear me?" she called, peering through the driver's window. A man was slumped over the steering wheel, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. The car gave an ominous creak as it shifted slightly toward the cliff edge. With adrenaline surging through her veins, Olivia yanked open the door. "Sir, you need to wake up. Your car is about to go over." Ethan's eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding his vision. "What? Who are you?" "Someone trying to save your life," Olivia replied, unfastening his seatbelt and pulling at his arm. "We need to move. Now." As if on cue, the ground beneath the car's front wheels gave way. Olivia summoned all her strength, honed from years of lifting large dogs onto examination tables, and dragged the dazed billionaire from his vehicle. They tumbled backward onto the wet road, just as the Aston Martin tipped forward and plunged into the darkness below, the crash of metal against rock echoing up from the cliffs. Ethan stared at the spot where his $300,000 car had disappeared, then at the rain-soaked woman kneeling beside him. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and her brown eyes were wide with residual fear. You saved my life," he said, the realization hitting him harder than the impact of the crash. Olivia gave him a small smile, rain dripping from her nose. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Ethan said, his usual arrogance momentarily forgotten as he looked at this stranger who had risked her life for his. "They wouldn't have." In the distance, sirens wailed. Olivia had called 911 before pulling him from the car. She helped him sit up, her hands gentle but firm on his shoulders. "I'm Olivia Chen," she said, raising her voice over the storm. "Ethan Drake," he replied automatically, then winced as pain shot through his head. Olivia's eyebrows rose slightly. At the name, everyone knew Drake Industries, but her expression remained calm. "Well, Mr. Drake, looks like you're going to live to be arrogant another day." The unexpected comment made him bark out a laugh which quickly turned into a groan of pain. For the first time in years, Ethan Drake was speechless. As the ambulance lights appeared around the bend, he found himself staring at this ordinary woman who had just done the most extraordinary thing anyone had ever done for him. And somewhere, beneath the pain and shock, a tiny crack formed in the ice surrounding Ethan Drake's heart. 3 days after the accident, Olivia was cleaning kennels at Paws and Claws Veterinary Clinic when her coworker Mia burst through the door. "Liv, there's a man in a suit outside who looks like he stepped out of GQ magazine. He's asking for you, and oh my God, he arrived in a limousine." Before Olivia could respond, the clinic's door chimed. There stood Ethan Drake, impeccably dressed, in a tailored navy suit, a small bandage on his forehead the only evidence of his recent accident. Under his arm was an enormous bouquet of white lilies. "Mr. Drake," Olivia said, suddenly aware of her scrubs and the dog hair covering them. "What are you doing here?" "I tracked you down," he said simply, as if that explained everything. When she raised an eyebrow, he added, "Your name was on the police report. That doesn't explain why you're here." Ethan's confidence faltered for a microsecond. People didn't usually question his motives. "I came to thank you properly," The hospital was chaotic. Indeed, it had been. After ensuring Ethan wasn't critically injured, Olivia had slipped away while he was surrounded by doctors, nurses, and what appeared to be a personal assistant frantically typing on a tablet. "These are for you," he said, thrusting the bouquet toward her. "Thank you," Olivia replied, taking the flowers. "But you didn't need to." "I also want to compensate you," Ethan interrupted, pulling out his checkbook. "Name your price." Mia, who was pretending to organize patient files while eavesdropping, audibly gasped. Olivia's expression hardened. "I don't want your money, Mr. Drake. Everyone wants money." "I don't. Not for that. People aren't supposed to get paid for basic human decency." Ethan stared at her, genuinely perplexed. In his world, every action had a price. "Then what do you want? A job? A recommendation? A donation to your favorite charity?" Olivia sighed. "I don't want anything, I'm just glad you're okay." Ethan ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up slightly in a way that only made him more handsome. He wasn't used to rejection of any kind. "Have dinner with me," he blurted out. Olivia blinked. "What?" "Have dinner with me," he repeated, more confidently this time. "Tonight. Let me thank you with a meal at least." "I don't think. Please." The word sounded foreign on his lips, as if he rarely used it. Across the room, Mia was nodding vigorously and mouthing, "Say yes." Olivia hesitated. The billionaire standing before her represented everything she avoided in men. Arrogant, entitled, probably used to getting his way with a snap of his fingers. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability perhaps, or simple curiosity, that made her reconsider. "One dinner," she conceded, "but I choose the place." A victorious smile spread across Ethan's face. "Deal. Where should my driver pick you up?" "No driver, I'll meet you there. Nonna's Italian on Maple Street, 7 o'clock. His smile faltered. "Nonna's? I don't think I'm familiar with..." "It's not in Michelin's guide if that's what you're asking. It's a family-owned place. Real food, real people." She tilted her head. "Problem?" Ethan squared his shoulders, accepting the challenge in her eyes. "Not at all. Nonna's at 7. After he left, Mia rushed over. "Did the Ethan Drake just ask you out? The guy worth like $20 billion? "It's not a date," Olivia insisted, burying her nose in the lilies to hide her blush. "He just feels obligated because I pulled him from his car. Honey, men like that don't do obligated unless they want something. And the way he was looking at you..." Mia fanned herself dramatically. That evening, Olivia arrived at Nonna's in her best jeans and a simple green blouse that brought out the gold flecks in her eyes. She'd almost expected Ethan to cancel, but there he was, standing awkwardly by the entrance in casual clothes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "You came," she said, unable to hide her surprise. "I always keep my appointments," he replied, then added with unexpected humor, "especially with women who've seen me unconscious and bleeding." Olivia laughed, and something shifted between them, the beginning of a bridge across their vastly different worlds. Inside, Nonna herself greeted Olivia with kisses on both cheeks. "Who is this handsome man? Finally a boyfriend?" "Just a friend, Nonna," Olivia corrected quickly, avoiding Ethan's gaze. As they were led to a corner table, Ethan whispered, "Is this what normal people do? Eat at restaurants where they know the owners?" "This is what community feels like, Mr. Drake." "Ethan," he corrected. "I think saving my life puts us on a first-name basis." By dessert, a tiramisu that made Ethan close his eyes in pleasure, Olivia had learned that beneath the billionaire facade was a man who worked 18-hour days, could recite obscure poetry, and hadn't taken a vacation in 6 years. And Ethan had discovered that the woman who'd saved him was stubborn, compassionate, and made him laugh more in one evening than he had in months. When the check came, they both reached for it. "My invitation, my treat," Ethan insisted. "My choice of restaurant, my treat," Olivia countered. Their fingers touched over the leather folder, and both pulled back as if burned. Compromise, Ethan suggested, unaccustomed to the word. Let me handle tonight and you can choose and pay for the next place. Olivia raised an eyebrow. Next place? Ethan's expression turned serious. I'd like to see you again, Olivia, if you'll allow it. And, despite every rational thought telling her this was a terrible idea, Olivia found herself nodding. Over the next 3 weeks, Ethan and Olivia's unlikely friendship blossomed through a series of increasingly unconventional thank you meals. After Nona's came a food truck rally, Olivia's choice, followed by a secret chef's table at the city's most exclusive restaurant, Ethan's choice, and then a midnight picnic on the beach, a compromise. Each outing peeled away another layer of Ethan's carefully constructed facade. For the first time in years, he found himself talking about more than business, about the sci-fi novels he secretly loved, his childhood dream of becoming an astronaut, and the crushing pressure of maintaining the empire he'd built. Olivia, in turn, shared stories of growing up in a multi-generational home with her Chinese-American family, her abandoned art school dreams, and her contentment in a job that paid little but fulfilled her love of animals. One evening, as Ethan's driver was taking them back from a symphony concert, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. Problem? Olivia asked, noticing his frown. There's a situation at work. A potential investor is backing out before tomorrow's critical meeting. He sighed. I need to go to the office. At 11 p.m.? Welcome to my world, Ethan said with a rueful smile. Derek, change of plans. Take us to Drake Tower. 30 minutes later, Olivia found herself in Ethan's penthouse office, curled up on a leather couch while he paced the room, barking orders into his phone. This was the Ethan she'd imagined before knowing him, commanding, intense, ruthless in his negotiations. Yet there was something mesmerizing about watching him in his element. When he finally hung up, triumph gleamed in his eyes. Crisis averted, he announced, loosening his tie. You're different here, Olivia observed. More myself, Ethan supplied. I was going to say terrifying, she teased, but her smile was warm. He laughed and dropped onto the couch beside her. This place, this company, it's been my whole identity for so long. And now? Their eyes met. Now I'm not so sure. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibility, until Ethan's assistant knocked and entered with documents requiring immediate attention. I should go, Olivia said, suddenly feeling out of place amid the trappings of extreme wealth. Stay, Ethan said quickly. Please, I'll just be 15 minutes. Those 15 minutes turned into an hour as Olivia wandered the upper floors of Drake Industries. The contrast between Ethan's world and hers had never been more apparent. An original Picasso hung casually in a hallway. The break room had a champagne vending machine. Even the bathroom soap probably cost more than her car payment. When Ethan finally found her, she was standing before a wall of photographs depicting his company's charitable initiatives. You built a hospital in Rwanda, she remarked, pointing to one image. Tax write-off, he said automatically, then winced at his own response. Sorry, old habit. The hospital was actually important to me. Olivia turned to face him. Why do you do that? Act like you don't care when you clearly do? Ethan leaned against the wall, suddenly looking tired. In my world, caring is seen as weakness. Sharks smell blood in the water. Sounds exhausting. It is. The raw honesty in his voice surprised them both. The next morning, Olivia was hand-feeding a recovering puppy when her phone chimed with a text from Ethan. Emergency. Need your help. Can you come to this address? A map link followed. Concerned, Olivia rushed to the location, a community center in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. Inside, she found Ethan surrounded by excited children, looking completely out of his element in his designer clothes. What's the emergency? She asked, confused. Relief washed over his face. Thank God you're here. These tiny humans won't stop asking me questions I can't answer. It turned out Ethan had been scheduled to speak at a career day event but hadn't. Realized it involved actual interaction with children. Olivia burst out laughing at his panic. You run a multi-billion-dollar corporation but 8-year-olds terrify you? Shareholders don't ask where babies come from or why my hair is funny on top, he hissed. Taking pity on him, Olivia stepped in, helping translate Ethan's business jargon into language the children could understand. By the end of the session, he was sitting cross-legged on the floor, patiently explaining coding basics to a transfixed audience. Watching him, Olivia felt something shift in her chest, a dangerous melting of the barriers she'd carefully maintained. You're good with them, she said as they walked out afterward. Once you stopped treating them like aliens. I had help, he replied, his hand finding hers. The first touch they'd shared that wasn't accidental. That evening, Ethan took her to a charity gala, his world, his people. Olivia wore a borrowed dress and smiled through introductions to countless important people whose names she immediately forgot. She weathered the curious glances and whispered speculation about who she was and what she was doing with Ethan Drake. Everyone's staring, she whispered as they danced. Let them, Ethan said, holding her closer than strictly necessary. They're just jealous I'm with the most interesting person in the room. You mean the only person not trying to get money from you? His laugh rumbled against her cheek. That too. Later, as they stood on the balcony escaping the crowd, Ethan turned to her with uncharacteristic nervousness. Olivia, these past weeks have been… I've never… Before he could finish, his CFO burst onto the balcony. Ethan, the Henderson deal is imploding. We need you now. The spell broken, Ethan's face transformed back into the billionaire mask. I'll be right there. He turned to Olivia, apology in his eyes. Go, she said, understanding but unable to hide her disappointment. As she watched him stride away, commanding the room's attention, Olivia faced an uncomfortable truth. She was falling for a man who belonged to a world that would never truly accept her, or spare him enough time to love her back. A week passed with no word from Ethan. Olivia tried to convince herself it was for the best. Their worlds were too different, the gap between them too vast. But each time her phone buzzed, her heart leapt, only to crash when it wasn't him. You're moping, Mia declared, watching Olivia half-heartedly fill out medical charts at the clinic. I'm focused, Olivia countered. On what? You've written, administer treats as needed, as a medical prescription 3 times today. Olivia dropped her pen with a groan. It doesn't matter. Whatever was happening between us clearly fizzled out. Or, Mia suggested, your billionaire is just being a typical man, afraid of his feelings. Before Olivia could respond, the clinic's TV, perpetually tuned to local news, caught her attention. Ethan's face filled the screen as the anchor reported, breaking news. Tech mogul Ethan Drake has shocked Wall Street by announcing his temporary step back as CEO of Drake Industries. In a statement released this morning, Drake cited personal reassessment as the reason for his sabbatical. Olivia stared at the screen in disbelief. Ethan stepping away from his company? It was like a lion abandoning its pride or the sun, deciding not to rise. Her phone finally buzzed with his name. Meet me where we first saw each other? 7 p.m. tonight. The coastal highway lookout point was deserted when Olivia arrived. A sleek car was parked near the edge. Not an Aston Martin this time, but something equally expensive. And Ethan stood beside it, staring out at the ocean. He turned at the sound of her approaching footsteps. You came, he said, echoing her words from their first dinner. I saw the news, Olivia replied, stopping a few feet away. What's going on, Ethan? He took a deep breath. I haven't been sleeping, or eating properly, or thinking straight, really. Are you sick? She instinctively stepped closer, concern overriding her hesitation. No. He ran a hand through his hair, which looked less perfectly styled than usual. I think I'm having an existential crisis, and it's your fault. My fault? Olivia's eyebrows shot up. Before you dragged me out of that car, I knew exactly who I was. Ethan Drake, CEO, billionaire, the man who never lost. My life was meetings and deals and an occasional meaningless date with someone who looked good in business magazine photos. He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Then you came along and made me laugh at food trucks and talk to children and dance without calculating who was watching. You made me want things I never thought I needed. What things? Olivia whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. Time, real conversations, the ability to be somewhere and actually be present, not thinking about the next meeting. You. His voice cracked on the last word. Especially you. Olivia swallowed hard. Ethan, our worlds are completely different. I don't care, he interrupted. I've spent my entire adult life in my world, and you know what? It's exhausting and often empty. But when I'm with you, even doing the most ordinary things, I feel alive. He took her hands in his. After you pulled me from that car, the doctor said I was lucky. I didn't understand what that meant until now. It wasn't about surviving the crash. It was about meeting you. Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. You can't just abandon your company, it's your life's work. I'm not abandoning it, I'm delegating, taking a step back to focus on who really matters. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. If you'll have me. What if it doesn't work? What if 6 months from now you resent trading board meetings for movie nights and takeout? Ethan's lips curved into a smile. First, I'll have you know I've developed a deep appreciation for those spring rolls from the food truck. Second, his expression grew serious again. I'm not saying it will be easy. We're from different worlds with different perspectives. We'll argue and make mistakes, but I'd rather risk failure with you than succeed without you. A tear slipped down Olivia's cheek. That's the most non-arrogant thing I've ever heard you say. I'm learning, he murmured, wiping away her tear with his thumb. So, Dr. Chen, what's your prognosis? Is there hope for this patient? Olivia laughed through her tears. I work with animals, not people. I've been called worse. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I think, with proper care and attention, the patient has excellent chances of recovery. Ethan's arms encircled her waist. And what does this treatment plan involve? Patience, honesty, regular doses of humility. Her hands slid up to his shoulders. And this. She rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as months of tension and longing finally found release. The setting sun bathed them in golden light as the waves crashed below, nature itself celebrating this unlikely union. When they finally broke apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I think I'm already feeling better. Good, Olivia whispered, because I have a feeling this treatment will be long-term. I was hoping for lifetime, Ethan replied, his voice so soft it almost disappeared into the ocean breeze. 1 year later, the coastal highway had a new guardrail installed, courtesy of an anonymous donation from Drake Industries. A small, tasteful plaque commemorated it simply, where two worlds collided and became one. Nearby, in a modest house, with an immodest view of the ocean, Ethan Drake, now working just 4 days a week and mentoring young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds, argued playfully with Olivia about whose turn it was to walk their rescue dog. I did it this morning, he insisted, though they both knew he didn't mind. Yes, but you had that important call, so I made breakfast, she countered, handing him the leash with a kiss. As they stepped onto the porch, Ethan paused to look at the woman who had not only saved his life but transformed it. Happy anniversary of the crash, he said, pulling a small blue box from his pocket. I have a question for you. Olivia's eyes widened as he dropped to one knee, the setting sun gilding his hair just as it had done the night they met. Dr. Chen, would you consider a more permanent merger of our assets? She laughed through sudden tears. You're still terrible at normal people speak. But you love me anyway. Against all logic, she agreed, pulling him up. Yes, Mr. Drake, I'll marry you, but I'm keeping my last name. I wouldn't have it any other way, he said, sliding the ring onto her finger. Nothing about us has ever been conventional. Why, start now? As they sealed the promise with a kiss, both acknowledged the same truth. Sometimes the most valuable things in life come from the most unexpected collisions.
Only 24 hours remain in the most ridiculous contract I've ever signed. William Blackwood glanced at the platinum watch on his wrist while savoring breakfast in his Manhattan penthouse. Eggs Benedict prepared by his personal chef, a panoramic view of the city he practically owned, and a bank account that grew every second that passed. At 32, William had everything money could buy, except the one thing his grandmother demanded for him to inherit the family empire: a wife. Mr. Blackwood, Helena's smooth voice, his personal assistant for 5 years, echoed through the intercom. Miss Livy is here. William nearly choked on his coffee. She never arrived before 9. Send her in, he replied, adjusting his Italian tie that cost more than most people earned in a month. The office door opened and she entered. Livy Montenegro, 28 years old, brown hair she insisted on keeping pulled back in a simple bun, discreet clothes that tried to hide a natural beauty that left him inexplicably irritated. For the past 11 months, she had played the role of his fake fiancé with a perfection that was almost unsettling. Good morning, darling, she said, and even after almost a year, the irony in that word still made him clench his fists. You're early, William retorted, not lifting his eyes from the documents scattered across his mahogany desk. Some emergency in your mediocre life? Livy sighed, a sound he had learned to recognize as her attempt to maintain patience. Actually, yes. I got a call from the hospital this morning. Something in her tone made William finally look up. Livy was pale, her hands trembling slightly as she held a worn purse he had offered to replace dozens of times, offers she always rejected with that irritating stubbornness. My younger sister, Isabella, she had a crisis during the night. The doctors say she needs urgent surgery, but the insurance is denying coverage and... Her voice failed. William watched in silence as Livy struggled to maintain composure. In 11 months of contract, he had never seen her cry. Not when he had been deliberately cruel about her clothes in front of his wealthy friends. Not when he had left her waiting for 2 hours at a restaurant because he had forgotten the appointment. Not when he had insinuated that she was just an opportunist after his money. But now, talking about her sister, she was falling apart. How much do you need? He asked, surprising himself. Livy blinked, as if she wasn't sure she had heard correctly. I didn't come here to ask for money, William. I came to warn you that I might need to step away a few times today to resolve this. I know it's our last day, and that you have that important dinner with your partners tonight. How much do you need? He repeated, firmer. $50,000, she whispered. But I can't accept it. The contract is clear, no financial help beyond the agreed payment. William stood abruptly, grabbed the checkbook from the drawer, and began writing. Livy approached the desk, eyes wide. William, what are you doing? Something stupid, probably, he murmured, signing the check. Here, 100,000. Use what's left to ensure she gets the best available treatment. Livy stared at the piece of paper as if it were a bomb about to explode. I can't accept this. Why not? Because you don't do things like this. You're arrogant, insensitive, and only care about yourself. For the past 11 months, you've made it very clear how much you despise me. Her words hit him like a punch to the stomach. It was true. Every word. He had been cruel to her from day one, determined to make that arrangement as unpleasant as possible for both of them. After all, it wasn't his fault that her financial situation was desperate enough to agree to pretend to be his fiancée for an entire year. Maybe I'm tired of being predictable, he said, pushing the check toward her. Livy hesitated for a long moment before taking the check with trembling hands. Thank you, she whispered, and for the first time in 11 months, when she looked at him, William saw something beyond professional resignation in her eyes. Don't thank me yet, he said, returning to his chair. Consider it an investment. I can't have my fiancé distracted during tonight's dinner. The Hartwells may be idiots, but they have eyes. If they notice something's wrong. Of course, she agreed quickly. But William noticed the tone had changed. Always business first. She headed toward the door, but stopped with her hand on the handle. William? Why did you really do this? The question hung in the air between them. William knew the answer. He had known it the moment he saw the tears in her eyes. But admitting it would mean acknowledging something he had been denying for months. "Ask me that tomorrow," he said finally, "when we're nothing to each other anymore." Livy nodded slowly and left, closing the door with a soft click. William was alone in his office, staring at the view of the city that would one day be his. 24 hours. In 24 hours, Livy Montenegro would walk out of his life forever, taking with her the secret he was finally ready to admit. Sometime during those 11 months of theater, he had truly fallen in love with her, and now it was too late to do anything but let her go. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Blackwood?" "Helena again. Richard Hartwell is on the line. He says it's about tonight's dinner. He sounds concerned." William's hand hesitated over the phone. Richard Hartwell never called unless there was trouble, and trouble on the last day of his fake engagement was the last thing he needed. "Put him through," he said finally. "William, my boy." Richard's overly cheerful voice boomed through the speaker. "I trust you're ready for tonight's celebration." "Celebration?" William frowned. "I thought it was a business dinner." "Oh, it is. But Victoria has insisted on making it special. After all, it's not every day we get to toast the future Mrs. Blackwood before the wedding. She's arranged quite the surprise for your lovely Livy." William's blood ran cold. Victoria Hartwell was Richard's wife, a woman who could spot a fake diamond from across a ballroom and had made a career of exposing social climbers. If she had prepared something special. What kind of surprise, Richard? Now, that would ruin it, wouldn't it? Just make sure Livy brings her A-game tonight. Victoria has invited some very discerning guests. The line went dead, leaving William staring at the phone in horror. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator. If the Hartwells were planning to expose Livy, he needed to prepare her. But first, he had to find her. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and despair. William found Livy curled up in a plastic chair, still wearing the same clothes from this morning, but now wrinkled and stained with tears. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile than he'd ever seen her. "How is she?" he asked softly, taking the seat beside her. Livy looked up, startled. "William? What are you doing here? I asked Helena to track you down. How's Isabella?" "The surgery went well. She's sleeping now." Livy's voice was hoarse from crying. "The doctors say she'll make a full recovery, thanks to—" She gestured helplessly. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to." William studied her face, noticing the way her mascara had smudged under her eyes, making her look heartbreakingly young. "We need to talk about tonight." "I know. I'm sorry I look like a mess. Give me 20 minutes and I'll be ready to play the perfect fiancé one last time." "That's just it." William ran a hand through his hair. Richard called. "Victoria Hartwell is planning something. She's invited discerning guests and has a surprise for you." Livy paled. "What kind of surprise?" "The kind that could expose everything. Victoria has a sixth sense for detecting fake relationships. She's ruined careers for less." For a moment, Livy just stared at him. Then, to his complete surprise, she laughed, a sound somewhere between hysteria and exhaustion. "Of course she does. Of course, on the last day, everything falls apart." She stood up abruptly. "You know what? Fine. Let her expose us. What's the worst that could happen? You lose your inheritance, I lose my paycheck, and we both go back to hating each other properly." "Livy, no, William. I'm done." Her eyes flashed with something he'd never seen before. Defiance. "I've spent 11 months pretending to love a man who treats me like garbage, watching you charm everyone else while saving your worst behavior for me. I've smiled through your insults, laughed at your cruel jokes, and played the perfect little gold digger for your entertainment." She stepped closer, and William caught the faint scent of her perfume, something simple and clean that he'd grown to associate with her presence. "But today, you showed me kindness, real kindness, not the performance you put on for others. And now you're here, in a hospital, worried about me." Her voice cracked. "So tell me, William Blackwood, which version of you is real? The man who just saved my sister's life, or the one who spent almost a year making me feel worthless?" William felt something crack inside his chest. She was right. He'd been two different people. Cruel to her in private, charming to everyone else. But sitting here, watching her fight back tears while defending her own dignity, He realized which version he wanted to be. "The man who saved your sister," he said quietly. "That's who I want to be, who I should have been all along." Livy's expression softened, confusion replacing anger. "Then why? Why were you so horrible to me?" The truth sat heavy on his tongue. "Because you made me feel things I didn't want to feel. Because every time you smiled at someone else, I wanted to burn the world down. Because somewhere in the middle of our fake relationship, I fell so hard for you that it terrified me." Instead, he said, "Because I'm an idiot who doesn't know how to handle complicated feelings." "Complicated feelings?" she echoed. A nurse appeared before William could answer. "Miss Montenegro? Isabella is awake and asking for you." Livy looked between William and the nurse, torn. "Go," William said. "I'll wait." As she disappeared down the hallway, William pulled out his phone and dialed Helena. "Cancel tonight's dinner," he said when she answered. "Sir? But the Hartwell contract—" "Cancel it, Helena, and send the Hartwells our regrets. Tell them there's been a family emergency." For the first time in his life, William Blackwood was choosing something more important than business. He was choosing her. Now he just had to figure out how to tell her before it was too late. Isabella Montenegro was nothing like William had expected. Where Livy was reserved and careful with her words, her 19-year-old sister was vibrant and direct. Her hospital bed surrounded by sketchbooks and art supplies that she'd somehow convinced the nurses to let her keep. "So you're the famous William Blackwood," Isabella said, studying him with the same intelligent brown eyes as her sister. "The man who's been making Livy miserable for almost a year." "Isabella." Livy's cheeks flushed pink. "What?" "It's true." Isabella turned back to William, unrepentant. "She comes home every day looking like someone stole her favorite book. I kept telling her to quit, but she said we needed the money too much." William felt that familiar crack in his chest widen. "She never told me she was unhappy." "Of course she didn't. Livy would rather eat glass than admit she's struggling." Isabella reached for her sister's hand. "She's been taking care of me since I was 10, you know. When our parents died in that car accident, she was only 18 and could have gone to college. Instead, she got 3 jobs to keep us together." Livy's grip tightened on Isabella's fingers. "Bella, he doesn't need to hear—" "Yes, he does." Isabella's voice grew fierce. "He needs to know that my sister is the strongest, kindest, most selfless person in the world. And if he can't see that—" She shrugged. "Then he's an idiot." William looked at Livy, really looked at her. The way she sat protectively close to her sister, the worn patches on her purse that she'd tried to hide, the careful way she'd budgeted every expense for 11 months, while he'd thrown money around carelessly. She hadn't been playing the role of a struggling woman. She was one. "Isabella," he said carefully, "what did Livy give up to take care of you?" "William, don't—" Livy started. "She was going to be a teacher," Isabella said proudly. "Had a full scholarship to Columbia. She wanted to teach literature to kids like us, the ones who don't think they're smart enough for poetry." Her voice softened. "But someone had to work, and someone had to make sure I stayed in school and out of trouble." The room fell silent except for the steady beep of medical equipment. William stared at Livy, pieces of a puzzle he'd never bothered to solve clicking into place. The way she'd sometimes quote literature during their public appearances. How she'd light up when children approached them on the street. Her quiet intelligence that he'd dismissed as ordinary. "I should go," William said suddenly, standing. "You two need time together, and I have calls to make." But as he reached the door, Isabella called out, "Mr. Blackwood, whatever you're planning to do about my sister, do it fast. Tomorrow she's going back to 3 jobs and no time for anything that makes her happy." In the hallway, William's phone with "Contact Columbia. I want to know about RID scholarship. Clear my schedule. World's ending. 2 hours later." He found Livy asleep in the chair, her head pillowed on her arms beside her sister's bed. "She hasn't slept properly in weeks," Isabella whispered. "She's been working double shifts to save money for my treatment." William set down the food and carefully draped his jacket over Livy's shoulders. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. "Can I ask you something?" Isabella said quietly. "Sure. Do you love her?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. William could lie, deflect, make some joke about business arrangements. Instead, he found himself saying, "Yes, I think I have for months." "Then why did you hurt her?" "Because I'm a coward." The admission came easier than he'd expected. "I've never felt like this about anyone, and it scared me. So I pushed her away before she could leave first." Isabella nodded as if this made perfect sense. You know she loves you too, right? William's heart stopped. What? She talks about you in her sleep sometimes. Not the mean version, the one she glimpses when you think no one's watching. The one who remembers how she takes her coffee, who makes sure she has a coat when it's cold, who looks at her like she hung the moon when you think she's not paying attention. I do that? All the time. Livy's just too scared to believe it's real. Isabella's expression grew serious. Tomorrow your contract ends. What happens then? William looked at Livy's sleeping form, peaceful for the first time since he'd known her. Tomorrow, she would walk out of his life forever, believing he'd only shown kindness because it was their last day. Unless, Isabella, how would you feel about having a brother-in-law who's trying very hard to be a better man? Isabella's grin could have powered the entire hospital. I think my sister deserves someone who sees her the way you do when you're not being an idiot. At that moment, Livy stirred, blinking awake. She found William's jacket around her shoulders and looked up at him in confusion. You came back? I brought food, he said simply, and I made some calls. What kind of calls? William pulled a chair beside hers, close enough that their knees touched. The kind that might change everything. But first, I need to tell you something I should have said months ago. Livy's eyes widened. William. I love you, Livy Montenegro. Not the woman in the contract, not my fake fiancé. You. The real you. His voice grew stronger. And if you'll let me, I'd like to spend the rest of my life proving I can be the man you deserve. The heart monitor's beeping seemed to accelerate, but William couldn't tell if it was Isabella's or his own pulse thundering in his ears. The silence stretched impossibly long. Livy stared at William as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. Her lips parted in shock. The heart monitor, definitely Isabella's, continued its rapid beeping, but Isabella herself had tactfully closed her eyes, pretending to sleep. You... Livy's voice came out as barely a whisper. What did you just say? I said I love you, William repeated, his voice steadier this time. I know I have no right to, not after how I've treated you, but sitting here, watching you with Isabella, finally understanding who you really are. He ran a hand through his hair. I can't let you walk away tomorrow without knowing the truth. Livy stood abruptly, the hospital chair scraping against the floor. Don't do this. Do what? This. She gestured wildly between them. Whatever game this is, I won't survive it, William. It's not a game. Then what is it? Her eyes blazed with a pain so raw it made William's chest ache. For 11 months you've made it crystal clear that I'm beneath you, a convenient prop in your little drama. And now, on our last day, you want to what? Rewrite history? William stood too, instinctively reaching for her, but she stepped back. You want to know why I took this job? Her voice cracked. It wasn't just the money, though God knows we needed it. It was because when I met you that first day, for 5 minutes before you opened your mouth, I thought, she laughed bitterly, I thought maybe I'd found someone who could see me, really see me. I do see you. No, you don't. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You see guilt. You see your last chance to play the hero before I disappear forever. But you don't see me because if you did, you'd know that I've been in love with you since month 3, and it's been killing me slowly ever since. The words hit William like a physical blow. Livy. I fell in love with glimpses, she continued, her voice raw. The way you'd straighten my chair before I sat down at public events. How you'd order my favorite dessert without asking when we were at restaurants. The way you'd look at me sometimes when you thought I wasn't watching, like I was something precious instead of something you'd purchased. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and William had never wanted to hold someone more in his entire life. So don't you dare stand there and tell me you love me now, when it's safe, when there are no consequences. When tomorrow you'll go back to your world and I'll go back to mine. What if I don't want to go back? The words tumbled out before William could stop them. What if I want to stay in whatever world includes you? Stop. Livy's voice broke completely. Just stop. I called Columbia, William said desperately. Your scholarship. They'll reinstate it. You can finish what you started. Become the teacher you were meant to be. Livy went very still. You did what? You gave up your dreams to take care of Isabella. Let me give them back to you. For a moment, hope flickered across her features, so bright and beautiful it took William's breath away. Then it died, replaced by something that looked like devastation. And what happens to us while I'm at Columbia? We figure it out. Together. Together? She shook her head. William, you live in penthouses and private jets. I eat ramen for dinner and take 3 buses to work. Even if this is real, even if you mean it, how long before you remember that I don't belong in your world? Before William could answer, the door burst open. Helena stood there, breathless and panicked. Mr. Blackwood, thank God I found you. We have a problem. A big one. Not now, Helena. Sir, it's Victoria Hartwell. She's been calling reporters all afternoon, telling them about some explosive revelation she has about your engagement. The story breaks in an hour. The color drained from Livy's face. She knows. Knows what? Helena asked. Everything, William said grimly. She knows it's fake. Helena's expression shifted from confused to horrified. Sir, if this gets out, the board meeting tomorrow, your grandmother's will, the inheritance. I don't care about the inheritance. Both women stared at him in shock. You don't care about $40 billion? Helena squeaked. Not if it costs me her. William turned to Livy, his heart laid bare. I meant what I said, about all of it. The money, the company, the lifestyle, none of it matters if you're not in it. Livy pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. But there's one way to stop Victoria, William continued, his voice gaining strength. One way to make sure she has nothing to expose. He dropped to one knee right there in the hospital room, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Helena gasped. Isabella, who had given up pretending to sleep, sat up straighter in bed. Livy Montenegro, William said, his voice steady despite the way his hands shook. I know I don't deserve you. I know I've wasted almost a year being an idiot. But if you'll have me, not my money, not my name, just me, will you marry me? For real this time. The heart monitor went wild as Isabella let out a tiny squeal of delight. Livy stared down at him, and William could see his entire future balanced on the edge of her next words. She whispered, and then the room erupted into chaos as Isabella's monitors began blaring. Medical staff rushed in, and Helena's phone started ringing with what sounded like every reporter in New York. But all William could see was Livy's face, and the words she'd been about to say, hanging unspoken between them like a promise or a goodbye. The next few minutes blurred into a nightmare of flashing lights, shouting voices, and the relentless beep of medical equipment. Isabella's monitors had triggered a false alarm. Her excitement over William's proposal had simply elevated her heart rate. But by the time the medical staff cleared out, the hospital corridor was swarming with reporters. Mr. Blackwood, is it true your engagement is a sham? Miss Montenegro, how much is he paying you? When did you know the relationship was fake? William positioned himself protectively in front of Livy, but the damage was already spreading. Helena's phone buzzed continuously with calls from board members, investors, and news outlets. Through the window, William could see news vans pulling up to the hospital entrance. We need to get out of here, Helena said urgently. The hospital security can only hold them for so long. But Livy hadn't moved from her spot beside Isabella's bed. She stared at the chaos outside the window, her face pale and expressionless. Livy? William reached for her hand, but she pulled away. This is exactly what I was afraid of, she whispered. Look what I've brought into Isabella's life, into your life. You didn't bring this. I did, with 11 months of being too proud to admit how I felt. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. Her voice was hollow. It's over now. Isabella struggled to sit up straighter. Livy, you didn't answer his question. What question? He asked you to marry him. For real. Livy looked at the velvet box still clutched in William's hand, and for a moment, her mask slipped. William saw longing there, and love, and a pain so deep it made his heart clench. I can't, she said simply. Why not? William's voice cracked. Because this isn't a fairy tale, William. I'm not Cinderella, and you're not my prince. You're a man who's about to lose everything because of me. I told you. I don't care about the money. But I do. The words exploded out of her. Not for me, but for all the people who depend on you. Your employees, the charities your company supports, the people whose jobs exist because of your empire. How can I let you throw that all away from me? Helena stepped forward. Actually, there might be a way to salvage this. Both William and Livy turned to her. Victoria Hartwell called about an hour ago. She's holding a press conference in 2 hours to expose the truth. But if you two were to announce your real engagement first— We already tried that, William said. She knows it was fake. But she doesn't know it's real now, Helena said carefully. If you could convince her, convince everyone, that what started as business became love. You want us to lie again, Livy said flatly. I want you to tell the truth, Helena replied. You do love each other, don't you? William looked at Livy, his heart in his throat. More than life itself. Livy closed her eyes as if his words caused physical pain. It's not enough. Why isn't it enough? Isabella demanded, her young voice fierce with frustration. Livy, you've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. When do you get to be happy? When it doesn't destroy the people I love in the process. Before anyone could respond, the door burst open again. But this time it wasn't Helena or medical staff. It was Victoria Hartwell herself, flanked by 2 security guards and a camera crew. Well, well, Victoria said, her smile sharp as glass. The happy couple. Though from what I hear, happy might be overstating things. Mrs. Hartwell, William said coldly, this is a private medical facility. You have no right. Oh, but I do. Victoria held up her phone. Especially when I have video evidence of your little fake romance. Did you really think no one would notice that you two could barely stand to be in the same room? The way she flinched every time you touched her? The way you looked at her like she was an inconvenience? She stepped closer, her camera crew following. 11 months of lies, Mr. Blackwood. 11 months of deceiving your grandmother. The board. The public. All for what? Money? Actually, a new voice interrupted from the doorway. It was for love. Everyone turned to see an elderly woman in an elegant coat, leaning on a silver-headed cane. William's face went white. Grandmother? Eleanor Blackwood smiled, her sharp eyes taking in the scene. The reporters, the hospital room, William still holding the engagement ring, and Livy standing frozen beside Isabella's bed. Hello, darling. I hope you don't mind that I came as soon as Helena called. Helena called you? Eleanor's gaze shifted to Livy, studying her with an intensity that made Livy shrink back. So this is the woman who's captured my grandson's heart so thoroughly that he's willing to give up his inheritance for her. Mrs. Blackwood, Livy began, her voice barely audible. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. Fault? Eleanor laughed, a sound like silver bells. My dear girl, you've accomplished something I've been trying to do for 32 years. What? Livy looked confused. You've taught him how to love someone more than himself. Eleanor turned to Victoria, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. Victoria, dear, I believe you have a press conference to cancel. Mrs. Blackwood, I have evidence. Evidence of what? That my grandson paid a woman to pretend to love him? Eleanor's smile turned predatory. How deliciously pathetic that sounds. Almost as pathetic as a woman who spends her time trying to destroy young love. She moved closer to Victoria, and despite being several inches shorter, somehow managed to loom over her. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this hospital, cancel your little press conference, and forget you ever heard the name Montenegro. Because if you don't, Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room, I will make it my personal mission to ensure that every door in this city closes to you. Every charity will drop your patronage. Every social event will forget your name, and every friend you think you have will suddenly remember pressing engagements elsewhere. Victoria's face had gone ashen. Without another word, she signaled to her camera crew and swept from the room. Eleanor turned back to the stunned group, her expression softening as she looked at William and Livy. Now then, she said pleasantly, I believe someone was in the middle of proposing. The hospital room fell into stunned silence. Eleanor Blackwood stood in the doorway like a force of nature, her silver hair perfectly styled despite having rushed across the city, her eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. Don't look so shocked, William, she said, settling gracefully into the chair Helena had vacated. Did you really think I'd let you sign a year-long contract without having you followed? You knew? William's voice came out strangled. This whole time? From day one? Eleanor's gaze shifted to Livy, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Though I must admit, I didn't expect this particular development. Mrs. Blackwood, Livy said, her voice trembling. I need you to know that I never wanted your money. The contract was just a job, Eleanor finished gently. Yes, dear, I know. Helena provided me with quite detailed reports. 3 jobs, actually, plus caring for your sister, plus dealing with my grandson's abominable behavior. She turned to William with a look that could have melted steel. Did you really think calling her clothes discount bin chic was clever? Or leaving her at that restaurant for 2 hours? William's face flushed crimson. You know about that. I know about all of it. The cruel comments, the deliberate humiliations, the way you treated her like an inconvenience. Eleanor's voice turned razor sharp. I was beginning to think I'd raised a monster. Then why didn't you stop it? Livy asked, confusion clear in her voice. Eleanor smiled, and suddenly, William could see where he'd inherited his calculating nature. Because I needed to see what you'd do, whether you'd fight back, demand better treatment, or simply endure it for the money. She leaned forward. You chose option 4. You fell in love with him anyway. That wasn't smart of me, Livy whispered. Smart? Eleanor laughed. Darling, it was extraordinary. Do you have any idea how many women have tried to capture William's heart over the years? Socialites, models, heiresses, all of them perfectly polished and utterly forgettable. She stood and moved to Livy's side. But you saw something in him worth loving even when he was at his worst. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Isabella, who had been listening with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up. Does this mean you approve? Eleanor turned to study the younger Montenegro sister. And you must be the artist. William mentioned you in his reports to Helena. He reported on Isabella. Livy's voice sharpened protectively. Only good things, Eleanor assured her quickly. He was quite impressed by her talent. In fact, he's been anonymously funding an art scholarship in her name at 3 local schools. Both sisters stared at William in shock. You what? Livy breathed. William looked uncomfortable. It wasn't, Isabella mentioned wanting to teach art to underprivileged kids, and there was already money budgeted for charitable contributions. He's been doing it for 6 months, Eleanor said with obvious pride, without telling anyone, including me, until Helena mentioned it in her reports, of course. Livy sank into the chair beside Isabella's bed, looking overwhelmed. I don't understand any of this. If you knew about the contract, if you've been watching us, then why create the inheritance stipulation in the first place? Eleanor settled back into her chair. Because I needed to know that when William eventually fell in love, it would be with someone who loved him for who he is, not what he has. She gestured toward the engagement ring still clutched in William's hand. Most women would have said yes the moment they saw that ring. Do you know why Livy hasn't? William shook his head, afraid to hope. Because she's terrified that accepting it would hurt you. Even now, even after everything, she's trying to protect you from the consequences of loving her. Eleanor stood and moved to the window, looking out at the reporters still gathered below. There's something else you should know, she said quietly. The inheritance clause? It was never legally binding. What? William stared at her. I could never actually disinherit you, darling. The company, the money, it's all yours regardless. The whole thing was elaborate theater designed to teach you about sacrifice. She turned back to face them, her expression soft. I wanted to see if you'd choose love over money. And in the end, you both did. You were willing to give up billions for her, and she was willing to give up happiness to protect your fortune. Livy looked up at William, tears streaming down her face. You never needed to marry anyone? Apparently not. William's voice was hoarse with emotion. Which means, if I'm proposing now, it's only because I can't imagine my life without you. He dropped to one knee again, this time with steady hands. Livy Montenegro, will you marry me? Not for money, not for inheritance, not to save face with reporters, just because I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person? Livy looked around the room, at Isabella beaming from her hospital bed, at Helena wiping away tears, at Eleanor nodding encouragingly. There's still the matter of our different worlds, she whispered. Then we'll build a new one, William said simply. One where you teach literature to kids who need to hear that they're smart enough for poetry, where Isabella can go to art school without worrying about money, where we figure out how to make this work because the alternative, living without each other, isn't an option. Isabella cleared her throat. Livy, if you don't say yes, I'm going to have another medical emergency. A real one this time. That finally broke through Livy's defenses. She laughed through her tears, a sound more beautiful than any music William had ever heard. Yes, she said, so quietly he almost didn't hear her. Yes? Yes, William Blackwood. I'll marry you, for real this time. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Eleanor clapped her hands together. "Well then," she said briskly, "I suppose we should go deal with those reporters. After all, we have a real engagement to announce." But William wasn't listening to his grandmother anymore. He was lost in Livy's eyes, finally seeing his future clearly for the first time. The hospital conference room had been hastily converted into a media center, with reporters packed shoulder to shoulder, cameras flashing, and the low hum of anticipation filling the air. William stood at the makeshift podium, Livy's hand firmly clasped in his, their engagement ring catching the light every time she moved. He'd faced hostile boardrooms, aggressive investors, and cutthroat competitors, but nothing had prepared him for this moment, standing before dozens of cameras, about to bare his soul to the world. "Ladies and gentlemen," William began, his voice carrying across the crowded room. "Thank you for coming. I know there have been questions about the nature of my relationship with Livy Montenegro, and I'm here to set the record straight." A reporter immediately shouted out, "Mr. Blackwood, is it true your engagement was a business arrangement?" William squeezed Livy's hand, feeling her tremble slightly beside him. "Yes," he said simply, and the room erupted into a frenzy of clicking cameras and excited murmurs. "It was a business arrangement. Initially." He waited for the noise to die down before continuing. 11 months ago, I hired Livy to pose as my fiancée to fulfill the terms of my grandmother's will. It was cold, calculated, and probably the stupidest thing I've ever done." Another reporter called out, "How much did you pay her?" "Not nearly enough," William replied without hesitation. "Because what I didn't anticipate was that somewhere between our first public appearance and today, I would fall completely, irrevocably in love with her." He turned to look at Livy, and for a moment the cameras and reporters faded away. "I fell in love with her strength when she worked 3 jobs without complaint, with her kindness when she treated my cruel behavior with more grace than I deserved, with her selflessness when she sacrificed her own dreams to care for her sister." His voice grew stronger, more confident, but mostly, I fell in love with the way she made me want to be better than I am. Every day for 11 months, Livy Montenegro showed me what real integrity looks like, what genuine compassion means, what it's like to love someone so much that their happiness becomes more important than your own. A female reporter near the front raised her hand. "Miss Montenegro, is this true? Do you love him back?" All eyes turned to Livy. William felt her hand tighten in his as she stepped closer to the microphone, her voice soft but clear. "When I took this job," she said, "I thought I knew exactly who William Blackwood was. The newspapers painted him as arrogant, ruthless, caring only about money and power." She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. "And for the first few months he lived up to that reputation perfectly. He was rude, dismissive, and seemed to take actual pleasure in making me uncomfortable." William winced, but Livy continued. "But then I started noticing small things. The way he'd make sure I had an umbrella when rain was forecast. How he'd order my favorite coffee without being asked. The way his jaw would tighten when other people were rude to me, as if he wanted to protect me, even though he was the one being cruelest." Her voice grew warmer, more certain. "I fell in love with glimpses of who he really was underneath all that armor. And today, when my sister needed emergency surgery, he didn't hesitate to help. Not for publicity, not for business reasons, but because it was the right thing to do." She turned to face William fully, tears glistening in her eyes. "So yes, I love him back. Not the man the newspapers write about, but the real William Blackwood. The one who anonymously funds art scholarships for underprivileged kids. The one who just gave up his inheritance rather than lose me. The one who's standing here, in front of all of you, admitting his mistakes because he thinks I'm worth the embarrassment." The room had gone completely silent, every reporter hanging on her words. "Our relationship may have started as business, but it became something real, something worth fighting for." William lifted their joined hands and spoke into the microphone. "Which is why I asked her to marry me, for real this time, not because of any contract or inheritance requirement, but because a life without Livy Montenegro in it isn't a life worth living." An older reporter in the back called out, "What about the deception? Don't you think the public has a right to be angry about being lied to?" William nodded. "Absolutely. We deceived you, and that was wrong. But I'd rather face your anger and judgment while standing next to the woman I love than live another day pretending to be someone I'm not." Eleanor Blackwood, who had been watching from the side of the room, stepped forward. "If I may," she said, her commanding voice immediately drawing attention. "As the person whose will started this entire mess, I think I have something to add." She moved to stand beside William and Livy. "I've spent 40 years building Blackwood Industries into what it is today. I've watched my grandson grow from a spoiled child into a capable businessman. But it wasn't until I saw him willing to sacrifice everything for love that I knew he was ready to truly lead." She looked out at the sea of reporters. The inheritance clause was never legally binding. It was a test to see if William would choose money over love when forced to make that decision. Today he chose love. That tells me he's finally learned what real wealth looks like. Another reporter shouted, "So this was all an elaborate setup. This was a grandmother trying to teach her grandson that the most valuable things in life can't be bought," Eleanor replied calmly. "And judging by the way he's looking at his fiancée right now, I'd say the lesson took." As if on cue, William turned to Livy and cupped her face in his hands, right there in front of all the cameras. "I love you," he said, loud enough for every microphone to pick up. "Not because it's convenient, not because it serves any purpose other than the fact that you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I love you too," Livy whispered back. And when he kissed her, the room exploded in camera flashes and excited chatter. When they finally broke apart, William turned back to the reporters with a grin that transformed his entire face. "Any other questions?" A young reporter near the front raised her hand tentatively. "Just one, Mr. Blackwood. When's the wedding?" William looked at Livy, who was laughing through happy tears. "Ask me tomorrow," he said, echoing his words from what felt like a lifetime ago, "when we're everything to each other." But this time, tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. 6 months later, the chapel overlooking Central Park was small and intimate, filled with soft morning light streaming through stained glass windows. White roses and baby's breath decorated every surface, their sweet fragrance mixing with the gentle melody of a string quartet. William stood at the altar, adjusting his cufflinks for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. His hands hadn't stopped shaking since he'd woken up this morning, and no amount of deep breathing seemed to help. "Nervous?" his best man asked quietly. William turned to look at Marcus Chen, his college roommate, and the one person who'd known him long enough to see through all his facades. "Terrified," William admitted. "What if she changes her mind? What if she realizes she's too good for me? What if—" "Will," Marcus placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "She's here. She chose you. Stop spiraling." Through the chapel's side window, William could see the bridal suite where Livy was getting ready. 6 months ago, she'd been living in a cramped apartment, working 3 jobs, wearing the same 5 outfits in rotation. Now she was about to become his wife, and he still couldn't quite believe it was real. The past half-year had been a whirlwind of changes. Livy had enrolled at Columbia, pursuing her deferred dream of becoming a teacher while living in the guest wing of his penthouse. Separate rooms, at her insistence, until after the wedding. Isabella had moved in too, her art supplies taking over what used to be William's pristine home office. He'd never been happier. The chapel doors opened, and Eleanor Blackwood made her entrance, resplendent in navy silk and pearls. She'd insisted on walking Livy down the aisle, declaring that anyone who could tame her grandson deserved the honor of being escorted by the family matriarch. 5 minutes, dear," she announced, taking her seat in the front row. "She's breathtaking, by the way." William's heart hammered against his ribs. The string quartet shifted into Pachelbel's canon, and the small gathering of friends and family rose to their feet. The chapel doors opened again, and Isabella appeared first, radiant in pale pink, carrying a bouquet of white peonies. She caught William's eye and gave him a thumbs up that made him smile despite his nerves. Then the music swelled, and Livy stepped into view. William forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple ivory dress that fell to her ankles. No train, no elaborate beading. Just clean lines and classic elegance that perfectly suited her. Her hair was down for once, falling in soft waves over her shoulders, with just a few small flowers tucked behind one ear. She looked like poetry in motion, like every dream he'd never dared to dream, but it was her smile that nearly brought him to his knees. Pure, radiant joy that made her entire face glow as she met his eyes across the length of the chapel. Eleanor offered Livy her arm, and together they walked down the short aisle. With each step, William felt his panic ease, replaced by a certainty that went bone deep. This was right. This was meant to be. When they reached the altar, Eleanor placed Livy's hand in William's and whispered something in her ear that made Livy laugh. The sound was like music. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but William barely heard the words. He was lost in Livy's eyes, in the way she was looking at him like he'd hung the moon. "William," the minister prompted gently, "your vows." William reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. His hands were steady now. "Livy," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the small chapel. 6 months and 1 day ago, I thought I knew what I wanted from life. Money, power, success, all the things I could measure and control. He paused, looking directly into her eyes. Then you walked into my office, and everything changed. You taught me that real strength isn't about dominance, it's about vulnerability. That true wealth isn't what you own but who you love. That the most important contracts aren't signed in boardrooms, but written in the daily choice to choose each other. Livy's eyes filled with tears, but her smile never wavered. I promised to love you not just in the easy moments, but especially in the difficult ones. To support your dreams even when they take you away from me. To be the man you see in me, even when I can't see it myself. His voice grew stronger, more certain. I promised to never again let pride stand between us and happiness. To choose love over fear, every single day for the rest of our lives. And if I ever start acting like the arrogant fool you met a year ago, I give you permission to remind me of this moment. Laughter rippled through the small gathering, and even Livy giggled through her tears. Your turn, the minister said gently. Livy took a shaky breath and began speaking without notes, her words coming straight from her heart. William, for most of my life, I believed I wasn't meant for fairy tales. That love like this only happened to other people, in movies and books. I thought I'd spend my life taking care of everyone else and never being taken care of in return. She squeezed his hands, grounding herself. Then I met a man who pretended to be heartless but couldn't help showing kindness when he thought no one was looking. Who hired me to fake loving him, then spent 11 months teaching me what real love actually feels like. Her voice grew stronger, more confident. I promised to see you, not the newspaper headlines, not the bank account, not the business empire, but you, the man who funds art scholarships anonymously, who learns the names of every employee in his building, who holds me when I have nightmares and makes me laugh when I'm taking life too seriously. William felt his own eyes filling with tears. I promise to call you on your nonsense when you need it, and to believe in you when you can't believe in yourself. To build a life with you that's better than anything either of us could create alone. She smiled, that radiant expression that had been undoing him for months. And I promise that this is real. Not a contract, not a performance, but the truest thing I've ever done. The rings? The minister asked. Isabella stepped forward, presenting them with a grin. As William slipped the simple platinum band onto Livy's finger, he whispered, "No more contracts between us. Just promises. Just promises," she agreed, sliding his ring into place. "By the power vested in me," the minister declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. William, you may kiss your bride." William cupped Livy's face in his hands, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "I love you, Mrs. Blackwood," he whispered. "I love you too, husband," she replied. And when their lips met, the small chapel erupted in cheers and applause. As they kissed, William thought about that morning exactly 1 year ago, when he'd been counting down the hours until their fake engagement ended. Now he was counting forward, to all the mornings he'd wake up beside her, all the evenings they'd come home to each other, all the years of real, imperfect, beautiful love stretching ahead of them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, Livy looked up at him with eyes shining with joy. "So," she said, loud enough for their guests to hear, "what happens after the last day of our contract?" William grinned, spinning her around in a circle as their friends and family cheered. "Everything," he said, setting her down and kissing her again. "Absolutely everything." And as they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, William knew that the best story of his life was just beginning.